Hello, BookTube. I have a tiny, wee little mail haul for you here, just 3 packages. Don't know what this bodes for the day. It might be that that's all we're going to get. But I'm not going to wait until I have a 40-minute video for you. We'll just go through these 3 packages and see. After all, there are plenty of people who don't get any packages in the mail on a given day. So let's see what this first one is. Fairly heavy, something new from the new press. What have we got here? Oh, good. All right, this is a July the 2nd release. I think we saw this already, but this is the finished copy. A very nice finished copy from the folks at the New Press. This is edited by James Banner, and it is Presidential Misconduct. One name is going to spring immediately to mind, but I think this covers everybody. Let's see here. A document nearly lost to history. A report written by many of America's leading historians at the request of the House Judiciary Committee during the Nixon impeachment inquiry has been rediscovered and updated for another moment of national crisis in this book. Brought to renewed public attention by historian Jill Lepore in a September 2018 article in The New Yorker, it remains the only comprehensive study of official misconduct by America's presidents. And here it is updated. So we have, I think we talked about this book before, right? There are, let's see here. Yeah, it goes from president to president just with a bunch of different historians. You've got the editor, does a few. Richard Ellis, who's very popular. He does John Quincy Adams. He does Andrew Jackson. He's Martin Van Buren. Michael Holt does 5 or 6 presidents. Stephen Oates does Abraham Lincoln for presidential misconduct. And let's see here. Of course, I'm going to go straight to someone named John W. Chambers does Theodore Roosevelt, William Howard Taft, and Woodrow Wilson. And this, I got the advance copy of this and had every intention of getting to it right away, even though it's a July book, and I didn't. I didn't. I read a couple of chapters. I read the chapters that you would expect that I would read. I read John Quincy Adams. I read William Howard Taft, and I read President Kennedy. And what I need to do now is go through the whole thing from start to finish. So this is going to go up on the July shelf. The July shelf is going to be a nightmare, but I'm glad to have it. Very good. That's going to be a lot of fun to write about. Then we have this cardboard thing here. I confess, there's a part of me that is a little disappointed by the small size of the mail this time around. I'm sure there'll be more mail, but there are a number of books that I want. There are a number of books out there that I want. And some of them I haven't got yet. And you always wonder, I am bombarded with books, so I always have stuff to garner my attention. And that makes me wary that I'm going to forget about stuff that I want. Like, for instance, Chuck Wendig, a Star Wars author named Chuck Wendig, has a great big post-apocalyptic novel. And for a while, I just didn't bother with the idea of going out and trying to find out who's repping it and get a copy. And then I realized the reason I wasn't doing that is because Chuck Wendig fairly regularly makes an idiot of himself on social media, and that doesn't have any effect on his book. Why that would even make me hesitate, I don't know. So I really want that book, so I'll have to and that's one of many books that so what have we got here? Oh goodness gracious. Okay, all right, this is another one of those strange things. This is from the University of Chicago Press, and it has I've got a sheet telling me that this is a review copy. Okay, I already knew that. It doesn't tell me anything else at all. It doesn't give me any information that a reviewer actually needs, foremost of which is the publication date. So I'm assuming this thing is out already. But this is an Alfred Russel Wallace companion. A companion guide to the man who cogitated on the theory of evolution by natural selection. He came up with it literally when he was off his mind. when he was having a serious fever, he came up with it and wrote out his ideas and sent them to, among other people, Charles Darwin in England. and said, you know, I've come up with this idea. What do you think about it? And Darwin was horrified, absolutely horrified, because he had come up with that same idea himself years and years before, and had been steadily, studiously, and overcautiously assembling information and sort of gathering his thoughts. And the idea, very unworthy. It's not a story that's particularly that reflects particularly well on him. The idea suddenly crossed his mind that he had waited too long and that someone else was going to publish. And he scuppered that idea and ran his own book into print. And this is... wow, what? All right, so what is this? This is edited by Charles Smith, James Costa, who's fantastic on Darwin, and David Collard. And what have we got here? Although Alfred Russel Wallace was one of the most famous scientists in the world at the time of his death, today he is known to many as a kind of almost Darwin, a secondary figure relegated to the footnotes of Darwin's prodigious insights. But this diminution could hardly be less justified. Research into the life of this brilliant naturalist and social critic continues to produce a new insight into his significance to history and his role in helping to shape modern thought. Wallace declared his 8 years of exploration in Southeast Asia to be, quote, the central and controlling incident of his life. As 2019 marks 150 years since the publication of the Malay Archipelago, Wallace's canonical work chronicling his epic voyage, this collaborative book gathers an interdisciplinary array of writers to celebrate his remarkable life and diverse scholarship. Okay, so this is not going to be... This is an Alfred Russel Wallace companion. This is not going to be a selection from his works, which is the first thing that came to my mind. Instead, this is going to be... What are we going to have here? Oh, okay. All right. Great. Okay, so this is a collection of essays about him. So James Costa, for instance, does an essay called Field Study, Collecting and Systematic Representation. Don't wait for the Spielberg movie on that one. Oh, but he also does one called Wallace, Darwin, and Natural Selection, which will probably set forth the facts of the case. Costa's fantastic writing about this sort of stuff. That'll probably be the essay that I read first. When I get collections like this, I tend not to read them in order. Those of you who don't live in America but who watch lots of American booktube videos will have noticed that an omnipresent feature of our life here is catastrophe, is disaster. You'll have noticed when you watch American videos that there, except in little farmhouses in nowhere, Vermont, there are police sirens screaming in the background all the time. and all the inferences that you want to draw from that fact are correct. But there's also Acosta has another thing in here: historical and ecological geography. These all sound really good. And the last one is by Robert Smith, and it's the last essay in the collection is Wallace and Extraterrestrial Life. Maybe I'll read that one first. Well, typically, with what I was saying before, a screaming siren ran by to help someone who is on fire or who is pinned down by gunfire in the next county over. Before that screaming siren ran by, this most steady feature of my videos, 2,000 plus videos, every single one of them has a screaming siren in the background, usually more than one. But the thing I was saying before I was interrupted by that screaming siren is that when it comes to anthology volumes like this, usually I have a kind of a method because I don't want to fall into dead momentum. Usually all I'll do is read the introduction and then I will skip around in the table of contents rather than read it as a straightforward book. That's what I'll do here. Fantastic. What a weird thing. Okay, the Alfred Russel Wallace Companion. Great. All right, so two nonfiction, and now we'll do this. This is a box that is not, this is not from a publisher. Who is this from? It's from the Wethersfield Proctor Library in Vermont. Why would I want anything from that old dump? What is this? Tape all over it. I bet I know what this is. I think I was forewarned about this. Let's take a look and see. Coming all the way from the ancient Wethersfield Proctor Library. I bet I know what this is. Bean, do you want a Vermont box? It's a box from Vermont. Oh, I don't want you to have the tape, baby Bean. Here. Now, well, go to town. Go to town. Okay. I don't know how this happens. Those of you who watch Mark's channel at Richardson Reads will notice how regularly he pulls gems out of nowhere. He lives in the middle of nowhere, Vermont, in an ancient little farmhouse, and yet he regularly finds great stuff. And he found a great thing here, and immediately thought of in the other room I have a library of, I have 2 whole bookcases of collections of reviews and essays about books. I have, in other words, 2 whole bookcases of books about my own profession. He's heard me talk about that ad nauseum, and he's also heard me talk in person about that ad nauseum. If you think that I'm tedious about books only when the camera's on, you are mistaken. He had me in mind, I guess, when he saw this. How wonderful. This goes right in that library. I will have to find space on those shelves for this. This is Evelyn Waugh, and this is his collected essays, reviews, and articles. Look at the size of this thing. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. I say this all the time on this channel, that you get famous authors. Evelyn Waugh, of course, wrote Brideshead Revisited and a whole bunch of other great novels. And I say this all the time, that whenever you encounter an author like that, one thing you can almost know for certain, the number of cases where it is not true, you could count on the fingers of one hand. In almost all cases like that, there will be a collection of writing like this. In almost all cases like that, the author will long since have spent through their advance on whatever thin, lily-livered little novel they've just delivered to their publisher. They'll have long since blown through their advance, and there are gas bills due. There's a cavity you need filled. There's ready pocket money that you need, and there are always periodicals. At least in Waugh's day, there were always periodicals who were willing to float you 50 pounds or 75 pounds or maybe even more if you had a cushy gig. If you could get a book in the mail from the publisher, read it, and dash off a readable review. Every single person who has ever had this kind of a job, every person of letters, has had that opportunity in one way or another. And the more famous they get, the more they tend to want to forget it. So that at the end of his life, for instance, Anthony Trollope would never have countenanced the reprint of a collection of his book reviews and occasional prose. The Victorian idea was that such things were beneath you. And that the reprints that you should be concentrating on are your big, ponderous novels. And the 20th century has imbibed that wholeheartedly. So you get authors, well, actually, once authors become brands, then yes. But even so, in the 20th century, especially mid-century on, you will get some authors who think, well, my important work is the stuff that I have brooded over. By my manual typewriter, on my red checkered tablecloth, not this stuff that I dashed off for a deadline and, that was published in a newspaper. So in a lot of cases, in the UK and in America, you will have an author who has a vast amount of work that has never been collected or only spottily been connected, so that somebody like, who's a good example? Well, no, Anthony Burgess didn't care. God bless him. He was not a snob. But, okay, somebody like Gore Vidal, to use him as an example, would carefully comb through the pieces like that he wrote and carefully sculpt a book called An Homage to Daniel Shays. And then later, he would sculpt, again, very carefully, a much larger collection of those pieces into a book like United States, and then immediately work the phones to get it nominated for major literary awards, so that it didn't look like he was just grabbing cash by reprinting old work. But people like him, even the ones who do something like that, are still leaving out a vast amount of the stuff that they wrote, because it's easy to do. If you're plugged into the literary world like that, it's easy money. and no writer has ever had the ability to turn down easy money. And this is a perfect example of that. How wonderful. So what are we going to have here? Oh, this thing is huge. Okay, so we have editorials, we have reviews. Oh my, I am just going to sink myself into this. Yes, and Waugh has organized this into, my early decades, my later life. Here's the pencil that I used. Here it's under a case. It's in my museum. Of course, somewhere in here there will be the absolutely requisite essay on Ian Fleming. All of these guys do it. They all do it. And the Catholic epoch from 1946 to 1955. Okay, all right. So this is a perfect example of what I was talking about. This is a perfect example of someone who is carefully sculpting how this will be. I'm still going to eat it up. Absolutely eat it up. But the fact that he would carefully sculpt this table of contents means that even a book this big could have been 5 times as long. There's going to be all sorts of stuff out there that he just dashed off and didn't feel like including here. Authors some of them mistakenly assume, one of the reasons why they exclude some work like this is because they mistakenly assume that it doesn't include anything of value. And I don't know, a lot of you are as dyed-in-the-wool book people as I am. When you love an author, you can sense their voice in virtually anything that they write, and therefore nothing they wrote is of no value. So you really want it all. I've mentioned this many times on this channel, how much I would like that from everybody. Think of all the names. From names that are gone, like Irwin Shaw, Rich Man, Poor Man. Some of you may be old enough to remember the TV adaptation of his book, Rich Man, Poor Man, but it sold 1 billion copies on its own without a TV adaptation, and Irwin Shaw wrote book reviews his whole life. And I'm sure had the idea, once Rich Man, Poor Man, once that took off and he started getting massive royalties and buying a house on an island, I'm sure that he looked back and thought, well, that was journeyman work. I don't want anyone remembering it. But if you are an Irwin Shaw fan, which of course you're not, because there aren't any anymore, but if you were, wouldn't you want a 1,000-page book? 1,000 more pages of his prose? Same thing with, for instance, the late lamented Herman Wouk, who wrote book reviews his whole life. And so on and so forth. I mean, for every one author you have who's made peace with the idea and has collected those things, like the multi-volumes of Updike. Updike's occasional prose book reviews and articles are actually quite good. For every one like him you have that said, well, no, a book contract is a book contract. If you'll pay me to reprint these things, I'll gladly write a new introduction. For every one like that, you have a Pretentosaurus who thinks, well, no, I want that stuff buried. I don't want anyone to know that I did that. All right, so I'm glad that the Internal Revenue Service came calling to Evelyn Waugh, and he thought it was a good idea to put out a book like this. How wonderful. Wow. All right, well, this is footnoted as well. A hearty thank you to Richardson Reads for sending me this. This is actually going in the permanent collection. And, much as I love books, and much as I am ostentatiously surrounded by them, only a tiny fraction of what I see in any week has even the slightest chance of going into the permanent collection. This is going in there right away. I don't know that either one of these two will. An Alfred, Russel, Wallace reader, depending on how good the essays are. So a lot of times in companions and readers like this, only 3 or 4 out of 15 essays will be good enough to really remember, to really make you say, oh, that was fantastic. And if that's true, you don't want to keep the book. And same thing with Presidential Misconduct. This is also essentially an anthology of essays. So it'll depend on how good they are. But this thing, this I already know. This is an author I love, and I want these things anyway. So I will go through it lovingly. In fact, this presents a bit of a harbor landmine for yours truly, because it's going to be sitting right here tonight. And I have a full docket of work to do tonight. I have a full docket of stuff. I looked at one slide of my writing work recently and was horrified to see that I am behind on some aspects of it. I really, if I knew how to do such a thing, I should keep a spreadsheet of what's due when and how and what's important and what will take stages of work as opposed to being able to just blast things off. I am mostly Evelyn Waugh. I am mostly Anthony Burgess. I am mostly able to get a book, read it, and then blast off a review. But some reviews, no. Some reviews take more work than that, and I have fallen behind on one aspect of my writing. So I need to do that, and this is going to make that very hard to do. Well, as always, tomorrow. So there you go. That is the mail. We have a gigantic collection of the reviews and essays of Evelyn Waugh. Fantastic. And then 2 pieces of nonfiction, 2 finished copies. Presidential Misconduct. God only knows what some of these presidents will... I mean, I read My Big Three, but we'll see. I mean, some of these presidents were responsible for genocides, so it won't be hard to pick what their misconduct is. Others, I'm not so sure. We shall see. And an Alfred Russel Wallace companion that has an essay in it about Alfred Russel Wallace and extraterrestrial life. So there you go. That was a small mail haul, but boy, oh boy, it had no duds for me. So I'm going to wrap this up, but I will be back. Thank you, BookTube.